Hello students, welcome to the second session for 9th standard science for the second chapter of biology, that is the tissues. Well, in the last class we have discussed very well about the plant tissues. We have focused on the meristematic and the permanent tissues and their various classifications with their respective locations and the functions. Well, today our main focus of attention is on the animal tissues, and here human body's tissue have a huge role to play. So basically this is the classification of the entire animal tissues. So if you observe the chart very carefully, the animal tissues are basically categorized into four basic types: the epithelial tissue, the connective tissue, the muscular tissue, and the nervous tissue. Well, focusing on the first one, that is the epithelial tissue. If we dissect the word epithelial, that is the epi and the thelial. Now epi means the outer and thelial means the layers. So it forms some sort of covering of the outer layers of the body, and it covers the outer as well as the inner layer of the internal body organs. Furthermore, let us observe the cells of it. The cells are basically compactly packed with each other with some sort of the cementic substance. Just as the tiles are attached on the pavement, that is on the basement, exactly in a similar way, these cells are firmly attached with each other. Moving on to the classification of it. These epithelial tissues are further categorized into the first one, that is the squamous epithelium. Now the cells of it, they are extremely thin and flat cells, just as the tiles which we observe at our base. Now these cells, they rest on the basement membrane, just as the tiles are basically attached on some sort of floor. Exactly in a similar way, the cells are also attached on the basement membrane. Now where these cells are basically located? These cells are mainly located at the linings of various body parts like the mouth, the respiratory tract, and various other structures of it. The functions, it basically does the function of the protection and the filtration. Now when the cells of the squamous epithelium, they form multiple layers, then such cells are said to be the stratified epithelium. Stratified means strata. Strata means the layers. So they form multiple layers. And the best example is that of the skin. The skin has a lot of layers. So if the external foreign substance has to pass into our body through the skin, it will be difficult for that thing to pass on into our body. And it basically does the function of the wear and tear, that is the protection from various sorts of external agents. The third one, that is the columnar epithelium. From the name itself, the columnar, so they are the column-like cells. So they are tall pillar-like cells. The nucleus is not present exactly at the center, but slightly towards the lower region. And like the squamous epithelium, here also the cells are resting on the basement membrane. Where they are located? They are basically located at the linings of the intestine and various other structures of it. What it does? Now as these cells are basically present at the intestinal region, so it does the function of absorption and the secretion point of view. Furthermore, the ciliated columnar epithelium. So the structure of it, ciliated columnar, so they are also the column-like cells. But the only identification is there on the surface, there are a lot of millions of cilia, that is the hair-like projections. So they are exclusively located at the pharynx region as well as in the respiratory tract. So the materials can easily flow into our stomach as well as into our lungs also. And they help in the movement of various substances. Furthermore, the cuboidal epithelium, from the name itself, cuboidal, so they are basically cube shaped. They are also present at the linings of the major organs like the salivary glands and the kidneys also. And they have a huge role to play in case of the mechanical support for our body. And last but not the least, the glandular epithelium. From the name itself, this epithelium forms the typical gland. Now what is a gland? A gland means a bag-like structure which has the property of releasing some sort of juice, that is the secretion. Just as we have the sweat glands, and from those sweat glands the sweat is ultimately released. Then the salivary glands, from where the saliva is ultimately released. So the basic function is the secretion purpose. Now let us focus on another major tissue, that is the nervous tissue. Now from the name itself, nervous tissue, so there is no need to get nervous about it, but this tissue is basically forming the entire coordinated system of our body. We are able to move from one place to the other. We know which object to touch and which object not to touch, whether it is hot or cold. So that entire sensation is done by this tissue. So let us examine the structure of this tissue. Now this nervous tissue is basically present throughout the length of our body, and the structural and the functional unit of this nervous system are the neurons. So let us examine the typical structure of the neurons. It consists of the cytone, also known as the cell body. And this cytone or the cell body consists of its own nucleus and the cytoplasm. There are two basic cell processes, the axons and the dendrons. Dendrons are many, while the axons are only one. So the information that is coming from the dendrons, that will be interpreted in the cytone, and afterwards only one information will be going on through the axon. Just as for example, if you are sitting at a particular place, then there are a lot of informations that you are hearing on. Just as the birds are making some sort of noise, your friends might be calling you, the fan is making some sort of noise, as well as your parents are later on calling you. So out of all these informations, only one information is going. Then what about the other informations? The other informations are getting ignored. So that is the basic thing about the entire nervous tissue, that it helps us to control our body in a very well coordinated manner. Now let us understand this epithelial tissue and the nervous tissue through some sort of animated versions of it. Now these are the various types of the epithelial tissue: the simple squamous epithelium, the columnar epithelium, the cuboidal epithelium, and the glandular epithelium also. The first one focusing on the simple squamous epithelium. The basic function it does is the filtration. Here, if you observe the cells are absolutely flat and they are resting on the base, that is a basement membrane is there. So such kind of epithelium is also known as the pavement epithelium. Here pavement means the path where the cells are basically kept. So they are absolutely flat cells. Furthermore, they also does a lot of functions, but here the basic function is the filtration. Now you might be focusing on that as to where such structures are present. So they are basically present at the blood capillaries, the alveoli, the inner lining of the mouth. So these are the various locations, but the most important one is the skin. In the skin, it forms multiple layers and it later on forms the stratified epithelium also. Now, when such kind of squamous epithelium forms a multi-layered structure in the body of an individual, it is said to be the stratified squamous epithelium. stratified. Stratified means the strata. Strata means the layers which are there on the surface of the skin. Furthermore, if you observe these types of cells, they are tall cells and known as the columnar epithelium. They are tall column-like cells. And here also, where are they located? Well, first of all, they are basically located at the basement membrane. And the function which they carry out is the absorption or the secretion also. There are many other functions, but these two are the basic functions. The location is that they are basically located at the inner linings of the intestine, where a lot of absorption and the secretion ultimately takes place. Furthermore, on the surface of some of the columnar epithelium, there are many cilia. These are the hair-like projections. And the movement of the cilia ultimately takes place like the movement of the grass when the wind blows. Exactly in a similar way, the cilia moves. And such kind of epithelium is said to be the ciliated columnar epithelium. So basically they are the column-like cells having the cilia, mainly located at the lining of the respiratory tract so that the air can easily flow into our lungs. Furthermore, there are various other locations like the female reproductive system for the movement of the ova or the egg cell. Furthermore, now as the ova or the egg cell basically comes, as it comes in an easy flow, so it is mainly located in the female reproductive tract also. There are many other locations like the pharynx of an individual, so it is easy for us to gulp the food substances. The next one is the cuboidal epithelium. From the name itself, the cuboidal, so the cells are mainly cubo in shape. They are located at the kidney tubules, the thyroid gland and the salivary glands. Now, here in the diagram we can basically observe that the cells have formed an inner groove-like structure, and from that bag which has been created, some sort of secretion is mainly coming outside. So some sort of juice is mainly coming outside. And the cells which are releasing such juice are known as the gland cells, and such kind of epithelium is said to be a glandular epithelium. Now, where these cells are mainly located? At the salivary gland, the mucus gland, the gland secreting the ear wax. So at all these places, along with the digestive enzymes also. So at all these places, the glandular epithelium is mainly located. Now here we can easily observe that one individual is speaking and the other individual is listening through a string or the wire that has been connected. So the wiring is necessary for the transmission of the information from one individual to the other. Exactly in a similar way, such kind of wiring is there in the human body also. And that wiring system is nothing but the nervous system, focusing on the nervous tissue. So this nervous tissue transmits the information from one part to the other part. Now what this nervous tissue is made up of? So if you observe it out very carefully, it is mainly made up of the cells, and those cells of the nervous tissue are said to be the neurons. So this is a typical structure of a neuron. Now let us study it out very much carefully. Now there are various processes, multi-processes and the singular processes. The central one is said to be the cytone, having its own respective cytoplasm and the nucleus. It will be analyzing the information that it gets from the dendrites. So the cytone is basically having, or it is basically surrounded by the dendrites, and that information further goes to the axon. Well, at the terminal region of the axon, there are a lot of nerve fibers, And these nerve fibers have the inner supply of the blood vessels. So the blood vessels, they help in providing the proper nutrition and the nourishment to the entire body. And that transmission ultimately takes place through the spinal cord and then later on to the brain. So suppose an individual is ironing the cloth, and by some sort of accident, if that individual gets a particular shock, then through the neuromuscular tissue, that information will be sent to the brain. So that's it about the nervous tissue. Well, in the next class, we shall focus in much detail about the other major tissues, that is the connective tissue and the muscular tissue.